I've accidentally coordinated a theme with the previous video, as this is another set of games I've been meaning to cover. Number 6 on the top 10 list before Saya, but after Danganronpa 2, Lisa is a game I heavily borrow music from and have basically made one half of the show's theme next to Cuphead. Summer Love and Don't Deal with the Devil might as well be the harbinger for the show with my repeated usage of both, so I might as well give the only sad dad game I like the credit it deserves. Heads up, this will technically be a coverage of 2 games as Painful and Joyful happen back to back and share the same skeleton, the latter acting as an extended epilogue that is mildly divisive to the fandom. Character-wise, I can see a point, but gameplay? Well, to a degree, but not because of how it plays. And if you're wondering, yes, there is Lisa the First. No, I'm not going into it, as the importance it bears is purely narrative, with Dingaling Widdly Too Diddly, or his real name Austin Jorgensen, mentioning that the first Lisa was a bit of chasing the dragon on his part, following the breakout of Human Nikki and the burgeoning Earthbound throwback indie genre, or as I like to call them, Wander and Wonder games. Is First worth playing? Yes and no. Visually intriguing, Lisa the Painful and Joyful work with or without knowledge of the first, giving you my wishy-washy answer. Again, merely knowing what happens during the first is the key aspect of that game in relation to P&J, which I will fill you in as the need to know if that information pops up. And it honestly isn't hard to figure out what happens in First just from context alone, so play First at your own discretion. It can be a miserable experience, and not just on the story front. For me to honestly begin, you need to cast your eyes to the indie game boom, but while a few of you might suggest that places us around the dreaded time period of the early 2010s, you can put down your pitchforks and torches, as this won't be another rightful diatribe against Phil Fish and his malfeasance. Sadly, he gets to escape my grasp for the day, as this isn't about him. Instead, let's go further back than what people think the term originated from, circa the mid-aughts or possibly even farther. Indie games are a hard thing to pin down in general when it comes to classification. Through layman terms, do you prefer the spirit of the law or the letter of the law? Example, is No Man's Sky an indie title? Letter says no because Sony did handle publishing and the game was released with a $60 price tag, a wide margin from other indie titles that released with a smaller wallet cost. Spirit, meanwhile, says yes. Hello Games was a smallish team, and the core concept of No Man's Sky is so far from the mainstream that the only good descriptor for it is indie. Journey falls into the same trap as the letter and spirit argue with each other. Where's the line in the sand that determines a game as mainstream or indie? While all the logistical aspects of a game's development play a role in determining this, doesn't the other half, the nitty-gritty nature of the game, do the same as well? Can something like, say, The First Mother be considered indie despite the relationship it shares with Nintendo? A few of you probably get what I mean, while possibly a wide majority of you are pointing and laughing at me calling the little Nintendo game an indie title, but that is where the issue of indie crops up. At what point does a title cross the threshold? For those wondering, Mother was published by Nintendo yet developed by Ape/Pax Softnica, their relationship further posing caveats to the indie conundrum. From Earthbound Central, the formation of Ape goes as follows. March 1989, Nintendo invests money and founds Ape. Shigesato Itoi is made CEO of the company. Ape was created because Hiroshi Yamauchi, president of Nintendo, was concerned that ideas for games would eventually start to dry up if things continued as they were. He believed that exceptional talent would be what supports the industry into the future. Since Yamauchi was very fond of Shigesato Itoi's work, he approached him with the idea. Ape was filled with tons of talent, including Tsunekazu Ishihara, Ashura Benimaru Itoi, Akihiko Mura, Masayuki Mura, and many others. Once everyone was gathered, they all worked together on Mother. Before then, Itoi was mostly a celebrity copywriter, handling numerous advertisements before venturing into becoming an essayist and lyricist. While the West mostly knows him because of his contributions to the gaming world, I.E. the Mother franchise, which if I may be honest is C-tier compared to other Nintendo licenses, he's known way more in the East for all the other aspects of his life, like his appearances as a judge on the original Iron Chef. To go back to Earthbound Central, here's how the link between Itoi and Miyamoto was laid out. July 27th, 1989, Shigesato Itoi's Mother game is released. The relationship between Shigesato Itoi and Nintendo actually first started because of the dating sim Nakayama Miho's Heartbeat High School. Nintendo had called Itoi hoping he could assist with the game's publicity strategy. This led to his first meeting with important people at Nintendo. Itoi had been interested in games for some time, so he wrote a game proposal and showed it to Nintendo, but Shigeru Miyamoto's reaction wasn't particularly great at first. Miyamoto didn't know how serious Itoi really was about making the game, since a bunch of celebrities and semi-celebrities had tried making games before and they were generally bad. Miyamoto was worried that Itoi's game might wind up as just another one of those. Supposedly, Miyamoto's response made Itoi sad enough to cry while riding the bullet train back to Tokyo. Now I'm gonna cut off the Mother talk right here, as this is the element I want to call attention to. The first Mother should have its place in indie talks more so than how many people borrow from the franchise it's a part of to craft their indie title. Let's not kid ourselves here. Mother is a prime target for any aspiring indie developer to look towards. Without the somewhat zany series, we wouldn't have the likes of Undertale, and as I will explain later on, the Lisa series. I just think that Mother 1 is owed a lot more credit for the indie classification because of its oddity being a technical Nintendo project handled by a celebrity developed by a shell company that lampoons and parodies the RPGs of the day. It sold well, but never achieved any greater acclaim outside the deep roots it has to indie titles, something that Mother 2 and 3 share despite shedding the spirit seen as Nintendo developed both in-house. To actually present a definitive point of entry for Lisa, as I honestly wanted to present a point that provides a bit of a thinking piece, we begin in the year 2004 with probably one of the most well-known indie games released, Yumaniki, translation, Dream Diary. For those older in the crowd, I unlocked a plethora of memories dedicated to watching LPs around the quaint little RPG Maker title, and Yumaniki is a strange beast because of the shroud it hides in. Choice words from Wired, they provide the following. The PC game has been shrouded in mystery since it was first released on June 26, 2004, though released may not be the correct word. It surfaced, shared by a developer known only as Kikiyama, on the Forum 2 channel, Japan's rough equivalent to 4chan. The game was made in RPG Maker 2003, a publicly available free software suite for creating 2D role-playing games, meaning the developer, who has never revealed their identity, could be just about anyone. They're likely Japanese, and their choice of release method suggests a young man. That's about all that's known. Yumaniki never got an official release until way later, 2018 to be exact, but a rabid fanbase entranced by what could be considered quote-unquote the first walking simulator had already translated the small amount of written words within the game, allowing an English audience to experience the experience. It's hard to call Yumaniki a game in that it barely meets the criteria. Like LSD Dream Simulator, it bears closer to interactive art installation than fellow 2004 release Cave Story. As Time Whiplash ages you 10 years in 2, that isn't to say that Kikiyama didn't update their creation. Throughout the following years until 2007, they updated Yumaniki before vanishing off the face of the earth. Interestingly, and because all we can do is theorize what happened during their absence, I think a quote from PC Gamer explains why Kikiyama disappeared like an avatar. What kept the community together after more than a decade are the countless fan theories that try to explain all the weirdness found in the game, because Yumaniki is not just an abstract walking simulator, it's a dream, and in dreams everything has a meaning. The Yumaniki fandom has never received any explanations from the game's creator Kikiyama, though, who may as well be a non-person, a mysterious figure who always refused to reveal any details about themselves or the meaning of their game. Without any canonical answers, the fandom has been left free to theorize. Of course, when updates stopped, many within the Nikki sphere pondered what became of the developer, some gruesomely guessing that they died during the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, as the last email before Kikiyama's disappearance was dated to around then. While Yumaniki and Kikiyama would come back in a big way with an official Steam release, what is crucial here is the impact the game left on people. As Kathy McArthur of US Gamer states, "Back when I first played it, I'd never experienced an interactive piece of entertainment, game, or whatever else that experimented with its structure, its tone, and tackled its topic of depression and the resulting loneliness with such courage before. As someone who suffers from both of those things, it was the sort of game that made me feel really seen for the first time ever, even with its harrowing end. Yumaniki communicates loneliness visually and mechanically, transcending any barriers that could be had by language. For me personally, it was the first game of its kind to do so." Perhaps one of those people who played Yumaniki was one Austin Jorgensen. I mean, Austin has gone on record as saying that his first outing, Lisa the First, was a Yumaniki ripoff within Sup Holmes episode 92. Heads up, I will be truncating a lot here, as the interview Holmes conducts with Austin is an hour 30, though it does peer beyond the veil quite a bit, and I would recommend a full watch. For a bit of background on Austin, besides looking like the type of person who wouldn't come up with the idea of Lisa, he's both a part-time actor and accomplished martial artist, his primary focus being wushu. Like, here is footage of him in competition. In fact, his first step into the gaming world wasn't as a developer at all, but as a musician. Heads up, I will always try to refer to Austin as Austin because he loves using pseudonyms. As a musician, he's credited as Widley to Diddley or WTD, while as a developer, he goes under Dingaling. They are all him. Got that? So sometime around before 2012, Austin was in a relationship with a woman that seemingly had issues with her father. No matter what Austin and she did, his girlfriend would always bring up her baggage with her father. This tainted the relationship between Austin and her, leading him to realize how much one's past affects their present and future. Sometimes things never work out despite people wanting a happy ending, which garnered Lisa the First some criticism. The story of the eponymous character never gets resolved, as by the end of the journey, she doesn't forgive or pay back her father. While that gave him the inspiration for the story of Lisa, Mother 2 had its hand in shaping the visual stylings of his games, particularly what Austin would call the sort of South Park aesthetic. Why Mother 2 and South Park get away with having somewhat horrendous imagery or smart analysis is that the looks of either or are somewhat disarming. As Austin states in an interview, and I will paraphrase, if South Park was live action, it would be awful. Because it's a cartoon, there's less attention to realism, and your mind can accept it. Going from first to painful, Austin started hyper-focusing on the idea of River City Ransom meets Fist of the North Star with all the implications both those series imply. Post-apocalyptic? Check. Shirtless dudes beating the crap out of each other? Check. The usual mixture of comedic and dark story beats? Check. However, as he started mulling over the idea, particularly his inclusion to remove all women from the setting, he began thinking realistically about the situation. Austin researched prison and oil rig conditions, areas mostly populated with dudes where they don't see a woman in what feels like a lifetime, and molded his idea closer to that, retaining the previous two inspirations but throwing a bit of spice into the mix. While Mother 2 would still serve as a key influence on the project, Austin has cited Zelda as another influential source. He wanted Painful to have the exploration like Zelda, but for there to be a real incentive. He doesn't want you to complete a 5-minute puzzle only to receive a meager $100 for solving the brain teaser. While Lisa the First was a non-funded project, Lisa the Painful would be put up on Kickstarter for crowdfunding, where a lot of the finer details of the game kinda get divulged. There was a lot planned for Painful, which included party members for the main character Brad to recruit, story scenarios, character overhauls, you name it, that got left on the cutting room floor. Even in the finished product, you can inspect the code to find some leftovers of the proposed $7,000 Kickstarter. I say $7,000, but Painful raised about $17,000, reaching 2 stretch goals. An expansion sequel that would go under the name Lisa the Joyful, and some optional areas reached by boat within Painful, leading to encounters with Destructoid's dismal jesters, I.E. Jonathan Holmes, Jim Sterling, and Conrad Zimmerman. While the project was put onto the website around November 14th, 2013, it reached its funding and then some during the 30-day period where it ended on December 14th. Like every Kickstarter, there are a number of tiers dedicated to getting promotional goodies like t-shirts and art books, while some of the higher tiers allowed donators to create NPCs or even playable characters, some which sadly did get cut. As the introduction on the page goes, I, Austin Jorgensen, am a professional martial artist. I study wushu, my specialty is the drunken style. I started martial arts because of video games, mainly Streets of Rage and King of Fighters. I also study acting and writing. I love narrative in games, especially if it can weave well with gameplay. My income comes from winning competitions. It's a very modest living. Being a performance martial artist is no UFC. Martial arts is great, but my first and true love is video games. Earthbound is my favorite game of all time. It's done so much for me. Is it obvious how much it inspired Lisa? I hope so. I'm doing everything for this game, the graphics, programming, music, and writing. I've been able to create enough to start showing people, but progress has been extremely slow. It will take centuries to complete this project if I continue at a part-time pace. I will use the money from the Kickstarter to fund the game so I can devote all my time into production. If funding goes over 100%, I will devote just as much time to creating additional content and possibly bringing in more people to help with the completion and polish of the game. After receiving funding, Lisa the Painful RPG would take a year to come out, seeing a PC-only release on December 15th, 2014, Joyful released separately as DLC. With PC its only platform, I played the Steam release of Painful and Joyful, which has 2 separate versions, one that is Legacy and another that has better controller support. One has crisper font, the other is a bit easier to record. Yeah, that's how we open the story. Lisa's swinging body greeting us as an ill omen for things to come. And yes, she did commit suicide, so keep that pinned to the corkboard of your brain. It's an important detail. This isn't the end of the trauma conga line either, as we get introduced to Brad. Bradley Armstrong and his friends. Richard Weeks, Tony Sticky Anganelli, and Cheeks Gaywood. The unpopular kids as they're suffering a beatdown from Chris Colombo and his gents because of an alleged claim of ball stealing. Whatever actually happened, Brad takes the blame for his group and gets mugged, having to take a long walk of shame back to his house. Along the way, he spots Mr. Aganelli, who looks this side of homeless drifter, that he'd fit right into condemned criminal origins. If you thought Brad wasn't pushed around enough, when he gets back home, his dad Marty displays all the empathy of a raging alcoholic. beaming our guy with a bottle and sending him to his room with no supper, all the while Brad's baby sister Lisa wails throughout the night. That was about 40 years ago, a massive time jump happening between then and now. In that span, Lisa had her own mental journey compartmentalizing her abuse before she ultimately hung herself because she wanted to escape Marty. At the time, Brad was an adult and out of the house, leaving her alone with the Armstrong patriarch. Brad blames himself to this day, suffering vivid hallucinations that he self-medicates to mask. His drug of choice painkillers before switching to a little blue pill called Joy. Going through an episode, Brad stomachs a pill, but when he continues to hear a baby cry, he finds just that. A little baby alone in the current-day wasteland of Olathe, Kansas. How or why is unknown, but he takes a liking to the kid and brings them back home to his Richard Sticky and Cheeks' flop house. A baby hasn't been spotted in Olathe in a long time, not since an event called The Flash that removed all women possibly off the face of the planet. It just so happens that Buddy, what Brad has named the baby, is a girl as well, so there is a chance humanity might recover. Yet as his three friends try to coax him into giving Buddy up to the rando army as they are more qualified in handling something of this nature, Brad vetoes the plan by saying that this is his chance. A chance for redemption. Not having the ability to say no to him, Sticky, Richard, and Cheeks allow Brad to keep the girl as they all try to raise her in secret. Cue a montage where the important details are that Brad tries to give up Joy, and older Buddy tries to leave the hut only for Brad to force her back inside, and some happy fun times. That is, until Brad falls back off the wagon and goes on a bender, waking up to the sounds of a ferocious beast attacking one Terry Hintz. He pulled his hamstring and could really use Brad's help, which he pays forward by joining Brad's gang. Turns out Mr. Armstrong is going to need all the help he can get as the secret is out. People know of Buddy's existence and want to try and take her. While Cheeks died in the hut's raid, Buddy, Sticky, and Richard are nowhere to be found. Following their trail, Brad and Terry have a few encounters with some ruffians before meeting the grill of a truck. Chris and his gents, even in the post-apocalyptic, have decided to make Brad's life hell, not just content with running him over, but forcing a terrible choice on him. All of his items, or Terry's life. Having a gang of his own might ease this journey, so Brad gives up his belongings, mostly the Joy he has on him and the currency of this world, pornographic mags, to keep Terry around. Reaching a crossroads of sorts, signs that the rando army have set up shop here are made apparent, and the bridge further into Olathe has been cut. Oh, and some guys called the Men's Hair Club supposedly have a girl with them, giving Brad a few places to investigate. First off, he hits up a local village for some more muscle, the storytelling nerd, the luchador El Rage, and the drunk archer Olin joining his caravan. Brad tries to proposition a green-haired punk by the name of Punkert, but no dice. He seems too far down the pill bottle to be of use. He mumbles something about someone, and Brad's attempt to go clean from joy has him suffer a bad trip within town. Incidentally, Brad has a run-in with some mask-wearing weirdos led by a guy named Buzzo. They seem to traffic Joy within Olathe and peddle the drug to our guy, promising to see him again real soon. On the way back to the main crossroads, Brad and his gang run up on a disturbing sight. Punkert seems to have mutated into something unexplainable. Violent in nature, the now monstrous Punker is put down by Brad and co. on their way to the schoolboy shuffler's turf. Rando has moved in and is hogging all the gasoline for himself, which just won't do as firebombs are pretty effective combat tools. Slaughtering a few grunts of the army, Brad gets the shuffler's blessing and a few firebombs. While the group tries to head through Apocalypse Games, Brad's inability to jump proves to be a problem. Luckily, a bike happens to be in a long grassy field that would allow our tubby friend to cross over such a small gap. One tiny issue, another one of those weird flesh monsters is hanging onto the bike. Like Punker, it seems to be ostensibly spacey, only going on a rampage when people try to pass it. A few karate moves, arrows, finger beams, and wrestling maneuvers later, our merry band has a bike. Before rescuing the unnamed girl from the Men's Hair Club, Brad takes the bike out for a test ride, running into and beating down the wild man Beastborn so that he joins the party, and finding an odd polka dot wearing trumpet player. Seems like the toots throughout the region are diegetic. Anyway, a quick rest stop in games sees a much more vivid memory play out for Brad, one involving the unfortunate life of Richard and how he's jealous of Brad. Seems like he hasn't told Rich about Lisa. In this smaller village, Brad and his gang find Mad Dog the Barbarian, who's missing his spiked club. If they can find it, his less than stellar brain will join the team, no questions asked. And while they do find said weapon, it is only after a tough run-in with the Rhodes Scholars. Mad Dog in tow, this ever-expanding gang has a few more oddities happen to them, like earning a low blow from Scott Lawson, an ambush from the Ambusher, and meeting Widley to Diddley. We'll check on him later, as while Brad and the guys reach the Men's Hair Club, they go past it to find another lifelike memory from Brad's sordid history. Brad and Sticky weren't just friends, but dealer and client. How else did Brad get his painkillers? Yet Sticky cut him off, probably because he knew that Brad was holding on to pain. Out of the past, the group rescues a hen by the name of Goldie who belongs to a hermit by the name of Rooster. He wants no part in this pervert war, so Brad holds the hen hostage, compelling Rooster to join. Turns out the Men's Hair Club didn't have Buddy, merely a somewhat rotund man by the name of Farty Hernandez, who's seen far too much of the men of Olathe. The truck back at the crossroads belongs to him, and he proves his worth by fixing the bridge and joining the gang. All that's left to do in Crossroads 1 is pour out a drink for Widley to Diddley, Fishbowl having decided to Kermit with the croaking, hanging from his hut ceiling. Past the broken but now fixed bridge, Brad faces another hallucination of Lisa, who seems to decry his decision of protecting Buddy before facing off of two tall stacks of shit. Sweet Tea Rakeem, and Vic Cherry. I point this out as somehow the doofus Percy Monsoon lies past them having a bathroom crisis. Averting it, he joins the party just in time for a reunion with Richard. Old Ricky was hiding some resentment for Brad, calling our guy out for his selfishness with Buddy as the world is on the line. Guilt is a hell of a drug, and Brad simply digs his grave deeper by not explaining anything to Richard, demanding to know where Buddy is to deaf ears. Introducing a club to the mix, Brad gets Richard to speak up about where Buddy is. She's with Sticky waiting for the rando army, but it's like a switch was flipped. Mr. Armstrong mauls Richard in a joy-fueled haze, waking up to an unconscious Rich. If matters weren't worse enough, Buzzo and the Joy Cult make good on that rain check. Whatever Buzzo's boggle is, there's a history he shares with Brad, and he wants to make our guy endure the same pain that he had to go through. An arm or a life. Make your choice, with Brad offering up Farty to Buzzo's blade. Scratch one gang member. Continuing down this series of unfortunate events, Brad accidentally crashes into Rando, who seems not too perturbed by a motorcycle hitting him, though he does shed a tear for an unknown reason. The goons of Rando take greater umbrage as their boss ordered them to give Brad all their rations for cycle repayment, which they want back. 3 guesses as to what happens to these not-so-nameless mooks. Entering another crossroads, Brad and co somehow get shanghaied into a Russian roulette, Armstrong placing his bets on Percy to win 3 straight rounds, which the pushover manages to do. Free to continue this adventure, Brad's company meet a band of Super Sentai wannabes, the Salvation Rangers, squabble about as their 6th Ranger, Salvation Pink, seems to care more for pill-popping than LARPing. Like a few things, we'll check on them later. As for right now, Brad and his team not only witness something incredible, i.e. a middle finger monument, but clean out the roulette building of mags and participants. Blowing his brains out is Percy, with Terry picking up the dropped revolver torch to finish off the final opponent. Perhaps impressed, the voiceless bucket-wearing gunslinger, Buckets, fills in the gap that Percy left. New crossroads means new people to meet and or kill, the band of the Brad squaring off of another monstrosity. Henry Wyatt. Like a lot of the other mutants, he seemed docile until Brad took the record he was carrying. Said record gets Henry's brother Bo to join the group as he wants to know what happened to him. Spoiler warning, he doesn't. In the swamps that Brad recruited Bo in, Armstrong winds up taking a trip down memory lane of his days as a karate instructor. We meet a nervous, stuttering kid by the name of Dustin here in this flashback, who Brad takes under his wing. Still in the swamp, Brad accidentally takes a dip in the murky bog to discover the home of the fishmen. one count of stealing later that the fish Harvey Alabaster manages to acquit Brad of, our guy leaves the underground aquarium with a lawyer, a map, and green paste in tow. Not content with one animal companion, Brad offers up a hit of whiskey to the drunkard Bertie Hall, not actually a bird, which gets him to join and pesters Goose Thompson, not actually a goose, at the inn past the Banana Splits gang so that he falls in rank. Going forward from the inn, Brad has to deal with some football team practicing their moves for a big game coming up against Buffalo Van Dyke as he tightrope walks across a construction yard. Somehow, the Salvation Rangers have made their way here, with Pink once again blowing off his friends, this time to shack up with Brad. A bar has also found itself nestled in the web of girders, a fish-headed patron named Carp, eating Brad's green paste and joining post-haste. If you are wondering why this detour is happening, it just so happens that there is some dynamite on the other end of the yard which the gang gets after beating up Horace Finkel. A number of paths within this crossroads are blocked by rocks, with dynamite opening them up. Visiting the desert first, Brad pays the artist Gareth to step in line before running back into the Salvation Rangers again. This time facing off against Demon X, who is too strong for Armstrong and his small army. Thankfully, Salvation Black reaches into the deepest, darkest recesses of his mind to find a solution to the problem. Dumb NX has too wide a sprite and can't fit into any doors. With that hilarity, Brad picks up a duffel bag of unknown origin and has an epiphany. He didn't finish exploring the swamps. Back there on the other side of the large marsh, he meets up with the bees. Cross-dressers who offer some form of comfort in this womanless world. Doing a few favors for Queen Roger, the bat-wielding bee spares some of his time to travel with Brad. The owner of the duffel bag is also found, the vagrant RT who agrees to venture with Brad. Having satisfied this curiosity, Brad and the boys finish up exploring the desert, buying Clint Olympic services, and impressing Ajit Mandeep with their self-control. Rounding out some of the less important areas, Brad hits up a martial arts-obsessed village to gather Yazan and Jack for the long road ahead, while also dealing with a tiger-headed wushu player Dojo Buster. Defeated not by the likes of Bob Friday's Bullshido, but Brad's legitimate karate, Tiger Man throws his paws in with the gang as the group leaves the town, the last thing they do in it buying a map for a place called Dismal Island. Through another one of the blocked doorways, Brad and his boys find a rundown dump of a town, clearly a mock-up used for science experiments. Whoever ran the place, they seem to be experimenting with Joy, the drug having connection to a man named Dr. Yado. Crushing the mutant doctor, a different one from Yado, the group leaves after finding a series of Joy experiments that seem to include the ghouls they've been fighting in the town and the previous monsters I've been pointing out. They are someone's favorite, perhaps Dr. Yado's. Oh, and this mysterious man also killed possibly the only other woman on the planet for some greater plan. Giving Matt and Pat some dynamite so they can blow up the Bullshido village, Brad earns his sea legs by showing Farty's brother Shardy the garbage map taken from the Fishmen, bringing him to Garbage Island. There's no relevance here besides getting Fly and Ollies into the gang, and facing off against another monster, this one named Georgie. Dismal Island is much the same. Besides some slight subjugation from slave lord Jim, all Brad finds is another one of those monsters, Jonathan. Through dicking around in this crossroads, Brad and his somewhat sizable company fight their way through Wally's turf, the macabre mascot having amassed a giant cult that relies on him for sustenance. One dead mascot and probable whole village later, Brad visualizes a cave as a gross flesh pit filled to the brim of Marty spiders. After reliving the horrors of Lisa the First, the Marty spiders are what make that game unfun to play, our guy finally finds Buddy hunkering down in a cave. While Brad tries to get Buddy to shake a leg and move as it supposedly isn't safe, Buddy displays a bit of wisdom on her end, knowing that Brad has practically left her in the dark when it comes to the happenings of the world. Rick and Sticky have told her much, but Brad won't have it. Witnessing another lifelike mirage, this time of Mr. Agonelli, who seems to be of the same cut as Marty, Brad's off-the-cuff flight with Buddy is cut short by Buzzo and the Joy Squad. Hell still hasn't been paid, and Buzzo doesn't care if he has to harm Buddy to get under Brad's skin. Coerced by Buzzo to overdose on Joy, Brad fends off a malformed Sticky within his subconsciousness before proceeding to follow Buzzo's trail of violence. Trading blows with Columbo's gents on his way to another crossroads, another mental fabrication plagues Brad. This one of Lisa's funeral, which he was the only one to attend. Freeing himself from the waking nightmare, Brad joins the Eternal Wrestling congregation as a bit of a breather. Climbing up the ranks, Brad and his tag team partner, the Shock Lord, a walking natural disaster, earned the tag team belts, with Mr. Shock offering his sports entertainment know-how to Brad's party.
The Shock Master!
Waiting to tackle the EWC Championship belt, Brad continues along this long road only to run into Sticky, who basically calls Brad out on his bollocks. Rightfully so, as Sticky went through the same hardship as Brad, yet hasn't internalized the pain. Buddy's been passed off to the rando army now, which riles up Brad that he almost Hadouken Sticky into oblivion if it weren't for Rick. This borrows Sticky some time. However, it seems that Sticky's plan kinda backfired as Buzzo intercepted Buddy so that he could use her in his vengeance. Another tough choice. Your friends or Buddy's nipple. Picking the latter, Brad is let go by Buzzo for around 2 seconds as the blonde psychopath loses his grip on Buddy. That merely frees Buzzo up for another hard decision to force onto Brad. An arm or all your items. Liking both his limbs, Brad gives up his items before making it to the final crossroads. Buddy took Tardy Hernandez's boat, and if he wants to catch her, Brad will have to construct a new one. Thankfully, a few of the dudes in the crossroads have the tools needed to make such a vessel. But before tackling said task, Brad wins the EWC belt from the Federation's Undertaker gimmick, effectively banning Brad from it like his name was Scott Steiner. At least wrestling legend Sonny seems to be impressed with Brad choosing to associate with his gang.
Badasses!
Starting off this final leg of the race, Brad enters a somewhat strange lab filled with more of those creatures, one too distracted with pummeling a man into bloody paste to fight our guy, to find the resort map. Shardy boats him out over there, but outside of more references to the first and another docile monster, Brad finds little. The only notable detail is that a number of the hairy sack creatures seem to worship a poorly constructed trumpet. That's a bit unsettling. Back at the third crossroads, our boys head to the coastline to have one final standoff with Chris Colombo, who challenges Brad to a race. Whether he wins or loses, Colombo exits stage right with a handshake from Cole. While the rocks were a bit of a bust, the bathhouse, home to the malformed Beatty and the Devil's Bath Boys, has a component for the boat Brad needs, a set of truck keys, and Toby, Chris Daddy's lover. One ransom later, and Chris becomes a member of Brad's gang.
Are we the baddies?
Leaving the onsen, Brad takes the gang to Hollywood, finding out what happened to the Salvation Rangers as we haven't seen them in a while. All besides Black, who's been ripped apart, have become hideous mutants. Putting down Blue, our companions deal with another crude fiend. Hawk Hollywood, for which this region is named after. Defeating the makeshift flagpole, another piece of the boat is found. A boat of this era wouldn't be anything without wood, so Brad kills Bloodiest Wolf for the foundation of the ship. All that's left is tools needed to put the boat together, which Brad gets from Buffalo Van Dyke, as his football team is a pack of losers. The last of the hallucinations happens on the snowy mountain peak as Brad visualizes Dustin, the stuttering kid from one of the previous visions, who has a close connection to him. Before talking to Tardy, Brad and his group tidy up the region by squaring off against the mutant Peter and the man-killer Satan. Sadly, Birdie meets his end here by way of decapitation from the man named Mike. He was so looking forward to the boat's construction. Before getting it built, Brad has one last stare down with Sticky, killing him, allowing Brad and Tardy to work on the boat, our guy effectively abandoning his gang by leaving with Tardy in the morning. Though Tardy wants to join Brad for his search, Brad tells him he must do it by himself, bodying Tardy into a bag. On the isolated island Buddy escaped to, Brad not only finds her, but Marty. Seems the patriarch is trying to atone for the past by taking care of Buddy, attempting to push her away from Joy, but Brad won't have it. The joy has taken root as the son massacres the father. Fleeing to Rando Land, Buddy is tracked down by Brad, who finds her in the clutches of Mr. Agonelli, scratching her body up to leave his mark on the world. Bit of a visual metaphor, as the physical pain brought on by Agnelli is the same as the mental and emotional drain Brad caused Buddy, a revelation that regards Brad a failure. At the end of the line, Buddy willingly joins the ranks of the Rando army, Rando himself comforting Buddy in a somewhat weak voice as Brad deals with his own gang, Rando's army, and the Red Skull himself. The climactic showdown between Brad and Rando reveals that the Red Skull was a student of Brad's. In fact, he's Dustin Armstrong. Brad's adopted son then has a bit of a facial mishap going on. Mustering the final ounce of his strength, Brad has one last conversation with Buddy over the nature of their relationship. Brad tried to be a good father, but it's too little too late. His obsession with the past has hurt Buddy the most. Finally, breaking down in tears, Brad asks one request of Buddy: to hold him. He never knew what it felt like, and his daughter obliges, the broken man wondering if he did the right thing before passing out. Not in death, mind you. The nature of joy mutates those suffering extreme duress of any kind. Brad's final fate, that of a joy mutant who views Buddy as Lisa. As it turns out, Brad not only let Lisa down, failing to stop her abuse, but Dustin down as well, abandoning him after finding the lad hunkering in the Armstrong dojo sans face. He did it, in retribution for Lisa. He, a man named Buzzo. Flashback to sometime during that montage way earlier in the story. Turns out happy fun times weren't always the case. Brad, instead of teaching Buddy karate as a form of self-defense, threw her ass in the pit. If Buddy wasn't quick or decisive, the world would eat her alive, so Brad made sure she could kill at a moment's notice. Back with Joy Mutant Brad, he tries to attack a sleeping Buddy, but he's so ineffectual that she wakes up and someone mops the floor with him, the scuffle only stopping when Buzzo intervenes. Brad was his prize, Buzzo leaving Buddy with warnings about Joy and dwelling on the past. Exploring a bit of Randoland, Buddy runs into Bolo and a few of his stragglers, this piece of human garbage, a defector from Rando's fallen army. Even when Rando himself tries to prevent Bolo from whatever he's planning, the Red Skull is still deeply wounded from Brad, leaving our duo at the mercy of Bolo and his golden opportunists. At least, that was the case until the Joy Mutant sweetheart comes crashing out of nowhere to sate her bloodlust. Hiding in a cave, Rando and Buddy wait out the rampage while formulating a plan. They need allies in this tough time. But this is where Rando and Buddy differ. While Rando wants to fix the world, Buddy wants to rule it. Crossing into East Olathe, the twosome come across the list. The list of Olathe's warlords. They are, from ranking 9th to 1, Hawk Hollywood, Joy Mutant and dead, Hand Tsunami, dead, Buffalo Van Dyke, dead, Vega Van Dam, Mr. Beautiful, Lardy Hernandez, Dice Mahone, Cindy Gallows, and Big Lincoln. When Randa's friends turn out to be a poisoned well, Buddy stakes her claim on Olathe. If she can kill all the warlords, she'll be the big dog in the big yard, Undertaker style. And while Buzzo has nightmares of his past with Lisa in connection to Buddy, our duo gets to work. Buddy quite joyfully, Rando not so much. It's not like she can feel anything, her doses of joy leading her down the same path as Brad. Targeting Lardy, Vega, and Beautiful first. After she kills one, Buddy has a conversation with Rando in which the Red Skull functionally talks to an obstinate wall. What doesn't help is that the warlords do provide some form of safety to the people of Olathe, their forces holding back the Joy Mutants, which seem to litter the realm more and more, their handiwork also bloodying up the scenery. Come the bodying of Vega and learning that one of his allies, Bob Friday, has become a mutant, Rando leaves Buddy as he can't stomach her crusade any longer. Remaining on the list are Lincoln, Dice, and Cindy, though Buddy detours towards the Land of Hints in the newly found cult of Whitley Too Diddley, finding some dynamite and Salvation Green's mask in the process. Facing off with Dice first, his gang is in tatters as the leader is already a Joy Mutant that Buddy puts down. She also outlasts the mutant Harry to find Salvation Green, Tooley out of uniform and putzing about. While he doesn't have anything interesting to say, his shack divulges his connection to the Joy Cult, Buddy finding both a mask and a few members in a hidden basement. Seems like Tooley was the dealer for the Rangers. With said mask, Buddy opens up a secret Joy Lab, this one housing Lisa's coffin and a letter from Buzzo. Guess Yato is a thinking man who plans ahead. Cutting to Buzzo, he suffers another nightmare showcasing that Lisa wasn't exactly a saint, ordering around Buzzo like a puppet. Like Brad, Buzzo held on to the guilt he has for Lisa, but externalized it unlike Brad. Next on the chopping block is Cindy, but Buddy is too late. A roving band of cultists that worship the Joy Mutants have gotten to Gallows first. He's a tough nut to crack, though, as after Buddy butchers his killers, Cindy Gallows, strung up as a pincushion, shows why his name is on the list. He ain't a pussy, but he is killed by someone with one. All that leaves is Big Lincoln, but before Buddy can hand him the L, she finds Rando hanging precariously off a ledge by some barbed wire. Bolo has laid a trap and Buddy took the bait, leaving her with two options. Let Rando drop or hold on to dear life. Dropping him as the secret of his friends remaining hidden, Buddy easily disemboweling Bolo. Holding on, however, has Rando explained that he did somewhat let Buddy get kidnapped for her own good, and while Bolo tries to molest her, Sweetheart makes a meal out of Bolo, leaving Buddy unharmed. In this outcome, Buddy slices up Rando for his insolence, mistaking him for Brad in a joy-fueled rage. Either way, Rando is dead and so is most of Olathe, countless bodies lining the region as Buddy envisions Brad and Rando watching her every step. With the death of Big Lincoln, all that remains in the ruins are Buddy, Buzzo, any Joy Mutants still alive, and the Polka Dot Man, Dr. Yado. Misanthropic in nature, he wants to be the ruler over a kingdom of dirt, hoping that Buddy would have transformed during her Holy War, but seeing as that didn't happen, he sicks Sweetheart on her via a few tunes on his trumpet. Remembering that he's kinda important to the plot, Buzzo jumps in to deal with Sweetheart as Buddy stares down Yado, her actual father. But in the midst of the battle, Buddy's joy addiction begins to forcibly twist her mind, conjuring up memories of Brad and Rando that take the place of Yado. Rando and Brad did have good intentions for Buddy, held back by their own shortcomings. While they may have failed, they did love Buddy. Beaten and bruised, Yado drops a vaccine for Joy, which Buddy picks up before giving chase. Playing one last trump card, Yado tries to mentally break Buddy by claiming that he's a Gigabrain 5D chess veteran. Buzzo, or what remains of him, promptly shuts up the doctor. At the end of his rope, Buzzo finally takes the blame for what happened after Lisa's death. Brad was a victim that Buzzo turned into a target, so he didn't have to acknowledge the guilt. He worked with Yado just so he could torment Brad, though because he was so close to the object of his obsession, Buzzo's claim that Brad truly loved Buddy as a father does her daughter rings quite truthful. And for all his posturing, Buzzo was weak in the face of Lisa, letting her pull him into her suffering. Olathe would have been perfect for Lisa. Upon spilling out the truth, Buzzo cracks under the pressure and mutates. Buddy effortlessly puts down Bernard as she deals with one last obstacle. Her own vivid fabrication of Rando goading her into staying in this joyful world. All Buddy has to do is reject the vaccine. Yet she breaks the cycle, ingesting the vaccine to truly become free. Living in the remains of Olathe with the trumpet by her side, a mutated Brad still alive, and a child of her own loins, ending the story. Lisa's tale is all about the hang-ups of the past and how they mold someone's future, with the notable candidates being Brad, Buzzo, Buddy, and Lisa. The linchpin for all these characters and who possibly plays the most important role in the sweeping narrative is Marty Armstrong, as without him, none of the events going forward turn out in the same way. He is, in essence, the puppet master pulling the strings, as his vile abuse of Brad and Lisa saw the former leave the household as soon as possible, leaving Lisa all by herself as the sole target, while the latter would end up taking her own life as a means of escape after confiding in Buzzo the Buzzsaw, and ultimately failing in stopping Marty's contemptible actions, as he didn't care that his daughter was cut to pieces. Marty didn't have the capability of being deterred. What's interesting along these lines is how much Lisa and Brad wind up like their father, even though both tried their damnedest to separate themselves from him. For as much as a victim Lisa was, her own actions are beyond objectionable. While she was busy forcing Buzzo to scar her body, his mind was receiving its own scarring. The constant demands and false confessions of love were meant to wrap the young Bernard around Lisa's finger, and it worked. The adult Buzzo would carry out Lisa's will on a post-Flash Olathe. Put yourself into Bernard's shoes for the moment. You see a girl around your age battered and bruised, and you try to do anything to help. You're the Good Samaritan in this case. But by merely stretching out a helping hand, Bernard was dragged under by Lisa. And at that point, what else could Buzzo do? The guilt was already there. He could have stepped away, but the lingering thoughts of, I just left someone to abuse, would have nipped his heels. He opted to stay, which wasn't much better. One tiny association ruined his life, as Lisa employed many of the same tactics as Marty, forging a vicious circle that would pull Brad in as Buzzo sought out anyone to blame but himself. Which is the cosmically ironic twist of parts of this story. Brad and Buzzo are functionally the same. It's how they interpret their guilt which separates them. As previously mentioned, Buzzo prefers to project his outwardly. The first canonical action in the timeline that Buzzo takes against Brad is ripping apart Dustin's face. We're never outright told the cascade of events leading up to Dustin's mark of the Red Skull, so while he does mention Lisa, we can't be too certain if at that point she was still alive or not. Not that it matters anyway if Lisa told Bernard to tear up Dustin, or if our joy peddler did it out of his own feelings for failing Lisa, the outcome is still the same, to shame and attack Brad for his own failings. Bradley left Lisa to the wolves and opted to care for, if kinda distantly, his adopted son Dustin, so Bernard rending little Rando's face into mush is a form of payback. Why should your son have no problems when you left Lisa alone in a cruel, cruel world? And there's not really much to go into over the course of Painful, seeing as all of Buzzo's actions are solely meant to break down Brad, whether physically by taking an arm or two, or mentally by offing members of his gang or robbing him, or emotionally by forcing Joy onto him or placing Buddy into the line of fire. There is no greater meaning to any of this. It's petty revenge that doesn't fix the situation. Buzzo says it himself at the end of Joyful. Brad didn't deserve any of what came to him. In short, Buzzo was simply kicking a defeated man while he was down, only coming to the realization how much he was like Brad, causing his mind to crumble. Brad, meanwhile, shoves a lot of the blame onto himself, internalizing his guilt, which in turn shapes the course of his actions. While Buddy may be a daughter to Brad at the end of the day, only wanting to care for and protect her, which Buddy's joy hallucination seems to mimic, so her mind probably manifested those thoughts as the kind of person Brad truly wanted to be for her, he also views his adopted daughter as his second chance. Through raising Buddy and effectively stealing her away from the world, Brad can right the wrongs of the past that he left Lisa to. He can be there this time, but like a pendulum, Brad swung too far to the opposite end. If he was unconcerned with Lisa and sought out an escape for only himself, with an epilogue showing that Brad was forced by Marty to have a hand in abusing Lisa, his smothering overprotectiveness directed towards Buddy fashioned her repulsion of him. Brad's biggest sin is that he doesn't open up, not to his friends, not to Buddy, not to anyone. He takes the woes of the world unto himself, and effectively commits suicide because of it. No one knows of Brad's person or his past besides Buzzo, and his version is clearly painted with the blood of Lisa. Brad's rampant addictions, both to painkillers and joy, are his ways of handling his craggy history. The fact that Brad doesn't peep a word to Rick or Sticky speaks volumes of the kind of person Brad is. He views his problems as his own, and only he can fix them. But not every problem you'll face will be like that. While Rick conflates Brad as a lonesome junkie, his words lacking any kind of bite, Sticky knows what Brad has been through. Tony's own father was just as abusive to the young Sticky as Marty was to Brad. They had a shared source of trauma and could have easily bonded and worked out their past together, but Brad being Brad sunk deeper into himself, appeasing his woes with pills instead of facing them head on. That's why Sticky cuts him off from the supply. He's overriding the dealer half of his relationship with Brad with the friend half. He doesn't want to see his friend fall down such a dark road, but Brad doesn't care. He views himself as a singularity, an island. If Brad can't fix an issue pertaining to himself, no one else can. That's why he merely copes. First chance he gets during Buddy's early days, Brad retrieves the joy he threw away as an annulment of his promise with his friends when raising the only girl left in the world. Hell, Brad goes on a bender which leads to the death of Cheeks and Buddy's flight. This lone, selfish act is Brad's epitaph. When he needed to become a better person or simply be there for someone, he thought only of himself. And when he does decide to actually uphold any of his responsibilities, it's Brad's way or the highway. You can see that when he speaks for the group when Rick figures they should hand over Buddy to Rando, you can see that when Brad tries to turn away Terry, and you can see that when he teaches Buddy how to kill. There is a dark irony to Brad growing angry with Buddy when she tells him that Sticky told her about the birds and the bees, though Brad does misconstrue her words due to his self-centeredness, when he forced her to kill a defenseless man at a young age as a means for prepping her for the wicked world outside. This is an extension of the singularity that Brad is. He must be the one to raise Buddy. He must be the one to protect her. He must be the one to teach her. He must. All of Brad's actions get filtered through this lens, which, make no mistake, there is a kernel of legitimate good in what Brad is aiming to do. Olathe will eat Buddy alive if she is unprepared or uncareful. She can't afford to not know how to defend herself or go without knowing the importance of her role in the world. But Brad is snuffing out Buddy's own free will so he can atone for the mistakes of his past, and he ultimately overlooks a number of his deeds under the guise of a self-aggrandized greater good. This is where the multitude of events and beats from Painful make their mark, as you can read into a lot of them, particularly the sacrifices Buzzo forces onto Brad, the entirety of Russian Roulette, the gathering of the ship materials, what name you. The Buzzo tolls are probably the biggest example of the point I'm making, as while you can choose an arm to lob off, is Brad the type of person to go for that option? Losing a limb means you'll have a harder time finding and protecting Buddy, but gang members are dime a dozen. Brad doesn't personally know anyone that flies under his flags, so why should he care if he uses a few like the disposable pawns they are to him? Not but stepping stones to help achieve his goal in any means fit. While Brad gets forced into roulette the first 3 times, there is nothing stopping him from gambling his gang away for money and prizes that would make the search for Buddy easier. As long as Brad can find Buddy, that's all that matters to him. In turn, this takes a darker tone come Buzzo throwing Buddy into the crosshair, as her own bodily state is compared to Brad's gang. Is one of Buddy's nipples the same as 3 gangers? She has 2, while the 3 on the chopping block are wholly unique in their abilities, making your search for Buddy easier, and we know Buzzo isn't just going to let her go. You'll need strong men going ahead, and well, Buddy's tough and needs to get used to hardship. If she has to go through a little bit of pain so Brad can rescue her later on, so be it. And then even past that point, Brad's defilement of Bloodiest Wolf's land is one of the most sincerely unjustifiable actions he takes, as Wolf's tribe is purely on the defensive. Their land has been raped and pillaged of its blood trees from other war bands. The boat doesn't specifically need bloodwood to make it across, but because Bloodiest Wolf's territory is nearby, Brad willfully chooses to cut down the last blood tree as if he was related to the Onceler. And all for what? By the time Brad finally reunites with Buddy, she hates him, singling him out as the source of all her misery. Without Brad going on his egotistical crusade, how many people in Olathe would be left alive? Buddy might still have her nipple and a pristine face free from the claw marks of Mr. Agonelli. Speaking of, that detour of a scene is a metaphor. Brad might as well be in the place of Mr. Agonelli, as the pain he brought onto Buddy in his journey is equal to Agonelli scratching her up and leaving his mark on history. It takes that full realization that despite all his efforts, Brad only succeeded in causing the person he tried to care for pain and suffering, does he snap under his own weight. What he thought was good and just turned out to devastatingly be blind justification, that instead of lifting the shackles of the past off his shoulders, Brad bolted them right in without any means of removal. Buddy became a second Lisa who blamed him for his shortcomings. And just like that, Brad saw no other reason to live and twisted into a joy mutant stuck in a hell of his own making. Just like Buzzo. They are both so hung up on what happened to Lisa that they develop tunnel vision. The past can't be changed. You have to live with it and not ponder what could have been. All you can do to make amends is live a better present and future. Absurdly, it is Marty who learns this lesson, being the only father figure to Buddy that actually cared for her. This isn't an absolvement of his crimes. Marty has to live with what he has done to his family and their surroundings. He turned out Brad the way that he is, and the anger that his son has is justified, but choosing to brutally murder Marty right in front of Buddy, hurting her in the process as she goes to defend him as he only had her well-being in mind, is no different than what was taken out on Brad or Lisa. For as much as Brad hates his dad and tries to escape from him in the mirages of the past, Brad becomes Marty in the last minutes of his life. But I think that is what separates Brad from Marty, in that we understand why Brad did what he did. There's no explanation for Marty's abuse. It just happens. It is a powerfully unsettling choice that we never receive closure for why Marty did the things that he did. Sometimes there isn't an answer, like how sometimes there aren't happy endings. But for Brad, we learn to understand why he stakes his path on Olathe and come to both love and loathe him. Brad is unlikable, but deeply humanly so. He wants so badly to escape the circle he's found himself in, but sadly passes it on to Buddy as she cuts a warpath through Olathe. Buddy herself is a product of her surroundings. She has to be mean in a world that will rip her guts out. However, she falls into the same trappings as Brad despite wanting to distance herself from him. All those bad traits of Brad, like his wanton selfishness, ludicrous justification, and giddiness towards violence, are easily displayed in Buddy and her rise to the top. Think for a second what Buddy gets out of being the only warlord in Olathe. She claims that it'll mean that no one will mess with her ever again, that she'll be free from the cage the world has placed her in due to her nature of being the only woman left alive. But does the mindless slaughter of the warlords actually placate that self-imposed plight? How many warlords are actively searching for Buddy? By my knowledge, only one. Dice Mahone, and by the time Buddy reaches him, he's a joy mutant and his gang is in shambles. Lardy, Mr. Beautiful, and even Vega Van Dam were all minding their own business, dealing with their own operations. Cindy Gallows was busy becoming a pincushion, and Big Lincoln was a hermit. Buddy sought all of them out. None of them came looking for her, and the only person that fulfills that description is Bolo, who is rightful slime that got what he deserved. Buddy was free from the get-go of Joyful, but like Brad, she wanted to right a wrong of the past, this time centering on how many times people tried to make decisions for her. She conflates her freedom by mentioning that she never wants to fear being held down again, but takes that to the logical extreme of murdering almost anyone for getting in her way, whether because of a perceived slight or not. There's no way anyone will be able to take away Buddy's autonomy if there's no one left. And we know Buddy is capable of not slitting the throats of everyone she meets. Rando if you choose to drop him during the confrontation with Bolo, and Salvation Green escape her wrath. Buddy is sadly taking out her pain on the world, lining up everyone in the same queue and judging them together when Olathe is made up of many different individuals. Sure, Buddy will always have to deal with that nagging feeling knowing that she is the only woman left alive, but not every man has ill on the mind. And if I may propose an idea, who says that Olathe is the be-all end-all of civilization? Yado, the crazy scientist who invented joy and wants to be a man among beasts? Yeah, I ain't listening to a single word out of his mouth, especially since he can't face his daughter head on. For all we know, there is life outside of Olathe, making Buddy's bloodbath even less justifiable. That means her claim of being the most important person on the earth is unsubstantiated. Buddy is the equivalent of a toddler throwing a temper tantrum instead of working out her problems like the adult she wants to be taken as. Because we are centralized to Olathe, we never know what is past the borders, and barely anyone mentions the goings-on outside the region, with only Nern providing a bit of backstory and saying that time is wacky now due to the Flash. All Buddy really achieved was allowing Yado to steamroll the remaining population with his joy mutants in his path to becoming the ruler of the Dirt and Ants. Which, if you think about it, yeah, father and daughter did have the same idea, which would act as one of Buddy's breaking points under Joy. She was of the same caliber as Yado and played right into his hands, smacking her across the face that for all her ranting and raving about freedom, she was dancing to the tune of his trumpet. It takes Buzzo having reached his own revelation of the past to free Buddy from hers, pushing her to take true freedom with her hands and not repeat or languish in what has been. And that's the central message of Lisa. Instead of living in the past, live for the future and make it better. What brings this together is that a number of characters happen to deal with a traumatic past outside our main cast. While they typically get framed in a darkly comedic light, Horace the bulldozer operator and Morris the orphanage caretaker clearly had some skeletons in their closet that they managed to move past from. Funnily, it's a run-in with Brad that causes their pain to come back, almost like the dude is a bad omen. Even members of Brad's gang aren't exempt from this. Of course, this calls to attention the members of Brad's army that take joy, seeing as I would assume many of them who do so pop the pill to obscure the pain. For some, you can draw a simple conclusion as to why joy is their go-to drug. It isn't hard to imagine someone like Queen Roger taking joy to deal with the possibility of bullying and harassment because he cross-dresses. It falls under the same reason as to why he's so good at fighting. He no longer has to fear being picked on as he can back up his words with his fists. To quote him, putting on panties didn't make his balls disappear, but the scars are still there of what has happened, and we know that the bees have to deal with harassment and the like. Meanwhile, someone like Tiger Man or Carp require you to do a bit more digging into who they are. As we find out with Tiger Man, particularly through Austin, His real name is Lincoln Townsend. Putting two and two together, sharing the name of Lincoln and wearing an animal mask, Tiger is connected to Big L himself, explaining why he takes joy. The training he went through under Wolfie was so harsh that to possibly deal with the physical pain of having his body worn down to hone it into a killing machine, Tiger takes joy so he can always be in tip-top shape. It's hard to put down someone if they can't feel anything at all, easily pushing past human limits and pain thresholds to keep fighting. The reason why joy makes you feel nothing at all is that some people would rather forget the past, but that doesn't change what has happened, and opting to numb it away will lead to it eating you up inside. All the joy mutants have a gripe with their lives, the mutation only starting under heavy physical, mental, or emotional duress. The very concept of the drug is a pipeline for its own mutation. Once you forget the past, you are doomed to repeat it, each mutant following a singular path: violence. It's the only option that quells the anguish, as many of the content mutants have seemingly dealt with their hang-ups by gnawing its head off. That isn't how you deal with trauma, as it effectively turns you into a monster that inflicts the same trauma you've been afflicted with on others. For as lighthearted as the Salvation Ranger side story is within Painful, its bloody conclusion is quite apt in enforcing this idea. The only Rangers that don't hideously transform into a grotesque parody are Black, Pink, and Green. The rest fall under the pressure of joy within Hollywood. The only way you get this ending is by witnessing all their story beats, so you can construe that the leaving of Pink made some of the other Rangers realize how much of their time in life they wasted playing Super Sentai that joy overtook them. Even Green isn't exempt from this, as while he didn't take the drug, he still feels its ramifications as he distributed it to the rest of the group, Thule, a secret member of Buzzo's drug ring/cult. Why else would his shed lead to a meeting spot for the Joy Masks? Thule instead favored Flesh, as he can be seen visiting the beehive to wipe away his sorrows. It's only when he finds out about what happened to the rest of his friends and his involvement in their metamorphosis does he take his own life. You can take this as an opposite of Brad and Sticky's relationship, as while Tony was Brad's drug dealer, he knew when enough was enough and cut his friend off, wanting Brad to work out his issues instead of burying his past. It takes someone to rise above the pain of their antiquity and pierce the circle to finally become free and live a more hopeful life. And this isn't a purely single deal. Aren't we all humans with woes and scars from our past? We aren't islands alone in the open sea that must wallow in hardships isolated. Many of us come from a background of pain, making discussion easier than what it may seem, and redemption, emancipation, or freedom possible. You just need to let down your walls and be open on what is bothering you. Well, I could start at my usual point here, covering graphics and art direction before moving on to animations, then finally sound. I'm gonna throw you for a loop and begin with music, as Lisa, Painful and Joyful still has one of the most eclectic OSTs in a video game. Made entirely on a trial version of Fruity Loops, Microsoft's own music software, Austin takes you to all corners of the earth that makes describing and dissecting the soundtrack for Lisa hard to do. Dense is a proper description, as while a few tracks become motifs throughout the journey, Summer Love, Last Call Before Hell, The Big Girl Has Cometh, a number of them play in only one area. There's no difference between a track like Men at Work, which covers the whole construction yard, or Tall Grass Tussle, which plays in only a few fights. Both of them have less airtime than some of the other consistent themes. This lends a number of the listings a bit of weight, as it feels like every location has its own vibe when Austin isn't relaying overarching ideas and concepts through the medium of music itself. A tiny element I tend to overlook in these videos is how tracks are named, as naming conventions do have a role in describing what a track is meant to evoke. Numerous titles do this. A look back through the catalog I've covered for the channel plainly exhibits this fact. While sometimes a title for a song might simply tell the location the playable character is visiting, the opposite is more than true. A title invokes a clear idea on what is supposed to be represented. Calling attention to this, the three-act structure of Goodbye Baby, Goodbye, and Soft Skin tell a tale within how they lead into each other. The first third of this musical expedition is the somewhat empowering if low-key Goodbye Baby. Brad has finally started to live again after being dead for 35 years as he solos the rando army. Yet as the wounds rack up, Goodbye Baby's louder beats give way to the more distorted Goodbye. Lacking the techno backing and going with heavier droning from drums leading into peaking tones. the first steps in Brad's mutation into a joy mutant. Soft Skin ends the trilogy, a somewhat spacey and ethereal piece of music capturing how far removed Brad is from his own body. Of the three, Soft Skin is the shortest, not hanging around the logical conclusion of what happens when a joy addict finally snaps. Even when Brad finally reaches Rando leading into their scuffle, the accompanying track is The End Is Nigh. Once again, the track title is in on what is going on as it carries a double meaning, and the end is nigh yes as the game is almost at a close, but the mishmash of harsh overtones played on what I can only call a broken synthesizer with melodic and quiet backbeats already beat you over the head with Brad's mental and physical state. There is a guitar bridge in between the distortion that does imply the grandeur of father versus son, but it's wedged in tightly and seems almost ironic. One last send-off before Brad fully loses himself to madness. What's an honestly cool detail with the music of Lisa is that it informs the player about plot elements. Many of the Crossroad tracks are trumpet-centric, played out by Yado, as you can discover him in Crossroads 1 playing the area's music. By the time Buddy reaches Yado, we see that his use of the trumpet allows him to control the Joy Mutants, as he orders Sweetheart to attack Buddy with a few notes. That would mean any area that has one of the trumpet tracks playing in it means that Yado has a definite hand in directing some of the events there. He's ordering the Joy Mutants into position, explaining why some are where they are located, like Charmy. Yado's battle theme is the militaristic Broken Tooth March, combining a plethora of ideas into one track. The name alone ties together how the Joy Project was backed by the military before it failed, with the defining instruments being two dueling trumpets. It carries a boisterous air with it, ironic in that Yado meekly battles with Buddy, only really stepping into high gear after Buddy starts witnessing apparitions that aren't there. Boy Oh Boy is another piece that has the trumpet play an integral part, sneaking in after what I can only describe as the nonsense overtone, matching the same pitches as if to control or direct it. Hollywood is probably the last comedic area, and painful as it carries the billboards of Hawk Hollywood's face and the seesaw puzzles, but lying in wait is danger. You find the remains of the Salvation Rangers near the end of the area, and when playing on pain mode, Hollywood himself is a Joy Mutant. The level itself mimics the path of Boy Oh Boy, the comedy placed right in the front while the horror is in the back. It is hard to nail down what my favorite tracks are from the game, as the genres that Austin tackles are so wide. Something like the rock and metal inspired All-American Badass itself I view as a send-up to wrestling themes. One of Undertaker's gimmicks was the All-American Badass, as it plays during the Big Lincoln fight, is so far away from the indigenous beats and saxophone-laden Blood Moon Rising. You can't throw a stick without hitting something so audibly distinct in its own right. The smooth jazz of Garbage Day, reminding me a lot of the dungeon tracks of Fate Extra, is in the same listing as the angelic praise Wally. Austin left nothing on the table, mixing and matching various instruments, beats, what have you, to create a wonderfully bizarre original soundtrack that is a joy to listen to. While the OST heightens so much of the journey within Painful and Joyful, you are doing yourself a disservice if you merely listen to it inside the context of the game. It's something you have to go out of your way to listen to on your own time to fully appreciate. Probably one of the biggest examples of this is all the sampling that Austin did. While the most famous example from the soundtrack, of course, is Doolin's grunt from Shenmue featured in Work Harder, let's not forget that 666 Killchop Deluxe not only uses the MLG air horn effect, but starts off with Mongolian throat singing. And those are the only samples that I can casually point out. There's many more that I don't know where they originate from. What's more, there's the hauntingly beautiful voices performed by Marina Hova that rounds out the story, carrying many of Austin's usual stylistic choices, while Marina herself sings her heart out a sorrowful tune. It can't be understated how much I love the OST, as it didn't have to go this hard. Funnily enough, a lot of the other sounds within the game are either stock to RPG Maker or from other libraries. Yet how Austin utilizes them makes you forget that. Moments like the car starting up at the beginning of the second crossroads informing you right before it comes flying out of nowhere, or the sounds of the revolver firing are especially emphasized. Through these sounds alone, Austin can create tension or dread. Each empty click of the gun a maddening ring of continuation. There's a masterfulness in formulating the soundscape of Lisa, like how going near Widley to Diddley's house has his theme play, but in a quieter pitch that becomes almost overbearing when you actually enter his abode. Going to Before Then, the ka-chunks of the Barrel Bros overlap the Apocalypse Games theme, interrupting it at parts and making it slightly annoying to traverse through the area. It's like they know you want to listen to the cool music and are doing everything in their power to ruin it, leading to you slaughtering the bunch of them. Doing that, though, doesn't cause their sound effect to disappear. You basically have to live with it. Going to fight Satan, when you leave his truck, its horn blares out regardless if you've beaten him or not. It can completely catch you off guard, as it did me during my first time fighting him. You never know when something odd or peculiar will happen. You'll hear it first, and it can be unnerving to say the least. Much akin to how Chris Colombo runs you down at the start of the game. Visually speaking, while Painful and Joyful aren't what you'd call groundbreaking in this era, the art direction is what carries a lot of the characters. With a cast of 33 playable and a whole bunch more non, you'd think that Lisa would struggle to make each little bit player or crucial role stand out from the other, but no. All of the characters have that little something that makes them captivating. From Brad alone, you can draw a few conclusions with his design. He's balding and tenuously middle-aged, confirming that he's a washed-up has-been. However, his ever-vacant stare gives him an aura of foreboding. He could kick your ass if he wanted to, and he does that more throughout Painful's storyline. Contrast him with someone like Terry. Terry might not be the recipient of alopecia, but his 5 o'clock shadow tendency to wear muscle shirts and lack of actual tone immediately tells you that he puts on airs. Two groups of people wear muscle shirts: people who actually work out and people who want you to think they do. Guess which tribe Terry belongs to. And yet, these two are on the tamer side. A lot of the more noticeable companions are the animal-headed ones, none of them adhering to any type of conformity. Tiger Mask doesn't speak at all, Goose layers his dialogue with riddles and rhymes, while Carp babbles in Fishman. Not even Harvey, a literal fish that was probably born in the Fishman village, doesn't speak the language. There's the dandy Kickstarter character Yazan with his colorful outfit and pet cat by his side, the disheveled RT looking like he doesn't know what water even is, and the telescopic Bo whose mask helmet thing perplexes me. We still haven't even gotten to the referential characters like Salvation, Pink, or Shocklord, having their basis in Super Sentai and WCW Shockmaster. But instead of just being a blatant reference, Austin has fun with the archetypes, making Salvation Pink a guy who doesn't take the LARP too seriously, and Shocklord's always apologizing for his accidental tumbles despite how powerful they are. Because there are 30 companions to pick up and recruit, you're bound to find some you'll latch onto instantly. For as little as I use him in the main game, Percy might be one of my favorites solely because he's so out of his depth. Nothing beats his introduction and how it sets the mood for what kind of character he is. Then, when Lisa wants to, it goes full hard into horror with the Joy Mutants and other nasties. Each is twistedly designed, none of the Joy Mutants overlapping with the other. From extended and extorted limbs to twisted frames, it's hard to pick out which one is my favorite as they mostly get dropped on you with no explanation. Punkert is most likely the first minion you'll see, and the way I mentioned his transformation within the story recap is how it happens. There's no build-up or anything. You see Punkert as a human when you enter the village, then after talking to Buzzo, you see Punkert as a mutant when you're exiting the village. This pales in comparison to Peter's introduction, however. Peter might be the microcosm of everything I like about Lisa's presentation. You're mostly just traveling along, the only backbeat to your footsteps being a somewhat quiet and moody track when, BAM! Peter jumps from out of nowhere right in front of you. If you're not expecting a random Joy Mutant to show up from on high, you can definitely accidentally bumble into him, which carries a greater dilemma as Peter loves to bite off or snap the necks of party members. Again, there is no warning and no precedent. You either know that Peter is coming up and prepare for the struggle against him, or you don't get that grace period. Yet this is another aspect of Lisa I absolutely adore, how designs can contrast from who the character is. No better is this scene than with Rando the Red Skull. He's this large, imposing figure that you wouldn't want to mess with, but deep down inside, Dustin's a deeply understanding guy who mostly keeps out of conflict. None of the warlords messed with Rando's army, and I always figured that it's because they provide aid to everyone within the region. Rando's that nice of a guy that even someone like Vega, who's conceited and up his own ass, leaves the big Palooka alone. Going to Vega, his pretty boy looks outright state that despite his name being on the list, he lacks the muscle to actually bully people around. His two bodyguards are way tougher than him, assuming that Vega probably either words his way to getting what he wants, or uses threats that his big lads can carry out to achieve his ends. Yet, that doesn't mean he's a weakling. Him and Hawk Hollywood are warlords after all, so despite their obsession with looks, something that is funny with Hawk is that it's made clear that he's a rather ugly dude that tries to pretty himself up, they can, if need be, kick your ass. Buddy's evolution from supposedly defenseless MacGuffin to ruler of Olathe is entirely visualized by her body scars. It's like the person she actually is comes drifting up to the surface, which is in contrast to all the times we see Lisa, who's always dressed in a white poncho and lacks any blemishes. Brad is unaware of the true monster Lisa became, thus he hallucinates her as such a pure entity in a corrupt Olathe. That's why on the title screens for Painful and Joyful, she's different. In Painful, that's how Brad sees Lisa, a victim that deserved no consequence. In Joyful, we see her through Buzzo's eyes, the reality of the person she truly was. It's the comparison between a preserved and rotting corpse, the ideal and the real. The fact that this is only demonstrated on the title screens is the kicker. Austin understands the many facets of presentation. Tiny details inform massive swaths of the story or reinforce presented ideas without words. Presentation has always been more than how a game looks, and when someone takes advantage of that, the story they tell becomes one that lasts a lifetime. Lisa Painful and Joyful is an RPG, though smaller in scale compared to your Kingdom Come Deliverances and Elden Rings. It's a bite-sized RPG you can finish in a day like with a number of indie RPGs, but while that may be the case, there is some depth in this small-scale journey which comes in the form of the difficulty. This is a bit of a rarity in RPGs, as I can only think of a few off the top of my head where difficulty can be selected, but Lisa's options change much more than damage numbers and the like. After you save Terry from the Savage Beast, he gives you the choice to either activate Pain mode or continue on in normal mode. The main differences between the two modes is that extra encounters are unlocked and a new area opens up in Pain while they don't exist in normal. On the flip side, save crows explode in Pain, making them all one-time usage, and some alternate endings are only available in normal, as you can only achieve a joyless run in that mode, as Pain has its own ending. Heads up, if this is your first time playing Lisa the Painful, play on Pain mode. There's more than enough save crows in the game that their explosion on contact claws is barely a factor unless going for a certain party member, and the additional endings in normal only expand on certain plot elements like what joy is. YouTube is your friend in that case, as I've done joy, joyless, and pain mode runs to see what the differences are. It is literally a few lines of dialogue and what happens after Mutant Brad reaches Buddy. Controls are the same as they've ever been in any RPG Maker game. Movement is done through the arrow keys, with Z the confirmation button, X the menu or cancel button. Only in rare instances do other keys have usages, and while there is controller support, that's an up-to-you kind of thing. When playing Lisa, I prefer keyboard, while something like MGQ Paradox, made using RPG Maker as well, I use a controller. Swings and roundabouts. Moving from that, Lisa the Painful and Joyful are somewhat open area RPGs, meaning that level progression is centered around completing tasks within hubs to open up new pathways within said hubs or unlocking the next one. Case in point, the first crossroads of Painful requires you to beat Charmy so you can get the bike, allowing you to enter the men's hair club, to rescue Farty so he can repair the bridge, allowing you entry into the second crossroads. Of course, that is merely the required path you have to take, as there are a number of side paths and areas within the crossroads, and even the sub-areas in them that grant you items, weapons, or party members to bolster your fighting chances. Unlike a number of RPGs I've played, Lisa P&J are 2D compared to, say, Paper Mario, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VII, or what have you. This even separates Lisa from its core inspiration, the Mother franchise. Why this is important is that on the world screen you have to deal with some mild platforming. Now, while Buddy can jump while sprinting when she reaches a ledge, Brad can only jump onto higher ledges if they are directly above him. He needs the bike to cross gaps, and only if they are 1 block wide. Any wider and Brad will pop a sick bike trick as he falls to wherever. If off the bike when he tries to jump gaps, he'll sink like a stone to either one of two outcomes: falling damage or death. You are fully able to walk off cliffs in Lisa to your death, and it is scarily easy to do so, which might be the source of much of your frustration in pain mode. Nothing like going on an hour and 30-minute venture in the beginning of the game to save the animals, only to have to restart the whole entire prologue because of a misstep. If there is ground that Brad or Buddy can fall onto, depending on the height you'll take fall damage of set values. These range from none, 10, 50, 100, or 500 respectively. 10 showing up when you fall from a height of 3 blocks, 50 around 5, 100 around 7, and the only times 500 makes an appearance is when you have to make a long drop using the bike, like in the Schoolboy Shuffler secret area. Falling damage applies to everyone in your party and reserve, so while Brad and the main group might still be healthy, it is highly likely that a few of your underleveled gang members might be knocked out because of a deep drop. Outside of this diversion, Lisa P&J plays mostly like a standard RPG in that you can talk to NPCs to gather some lay on the land, or shopkeepers to buy items and equipment. However, this is where the Mother aspect creeps its head in, as a number of strange events can and will happen as you are exploring the world. One minute you might be simply going from one location to the next only for a hostile NPC to come rushing at you, or speaking to an NPC might initiate a fight. Lisa has a lot of quirks like this, and my examples only scratch the surface. Before getting to those though, let's tackle Brad, Buddy, the gang, and combat. There are minimal random encounters in Lisa, with the only ones common appearing in the dark caves, tall grass, or trash island. That means most of the time you'll see who is wanting to fight you in the overworld. Combat is turn-based with you inputting what options you want your party to carry out and then watching it unfold with stats determining speed, damage, and defense. But while that may be the case for a number of characters, Lisa's roster of ne'er-do-wells each have their own idiosyncrasies. Let's take Brad for instance. While fairly average in stat loadout and management as he uses a conventional MP labeled SP in-game system to perform attacks, his basic attack pulls up the dial-up combo system. A standard attack for Brad is in all actuality a series of 5 basic attacks stringed together using WASD. However, almost all of Brad's techniques have a button combination to them, which when inputted during the dial-up will not only perform the associated basic attacks, but in the combo with the technique. So for Home Run Slide, you get 4 basic hits from the dial-up on a singular foe, then you hit every enemy with Home Run Slide to end Brad's turn. Some characters do share this system like Tiger Man and Clint Olympic, but others still have other systems. With Joyful's protagonist, Buddy uses TP alongside her attacks being timing minigames. While you replenish SP via items or resting, TP is restored via combat. Whenever a TP user lands a hit or is hit, they earn TP, meaning using a skill also rewards some of the used TP back. There is also an item that replenishes TP in the middle of combat, which, because most TP users start with a random amount when a battle begins, is a needed investment if using such a character. Back to Buddy, when using one of her skills, a ring starts moving in on another ring with you having to hit the action button, Z in this case if using keyboard and mouse, as the smaller ring eclipses the bigger one so that her attacks do more damage and get added effects, mostly the bleed status. In saying this though, some of her other moves don't have this minigame attached to it. And this is what makes talking about Lisa's party members hard to do, as there are a total of 31, each with their own skills unique to them. While on paper, damage dealers like Buckets and Tiger Man act the same, what each is capable of doing, their stat distribution, etc. is diverse to the point that I'd literally be here all day covering all 31 if I did so. So, to overview Brad's gang, as Buddy only gets Rando for her first crossroads before he leaves, Rando acting the same as Brad, they are split into damage dealers, walking status effects, and supporters. Yet even with this umbrella I've opened up, a number of party members fulfill 2 or more categories at once. RT does heavy damage with his savage elbows, but gets access to a variety of status effects via his bag and sleeper hold moves. Yazan, meanwhile, has damage-dealing moves capable of inflicting status effects like Bleed or Fear, as well as having party-wide support. That makes team construction pretty freeform and painful, as you can find a spot for most characters. I tend more towards status effects and damage, running usually a combination of RT, Bo, Birdie, Carp, Buckets, Harvey, Yazan, Fly, and Tiger Man, but you might be different. Even with all who I've listed, each has their own dichotomies that I like to play around with. The only constant in my team is RT because he gets access to some of the more useful status effects like Blind, Burn, Weird, and Poison, while also being a solid tank and damage dealer. Before I get to those though, let's cover character stats, as these play an instrumental role in determining what a character is good at. 9 in total. They are Health, SP, TP, Attack, Defense, Special Attack and Defense, Speed, and Luck. Attack and defense determine how strong your physical attacks and defense are, how hard you can throw and take a punch, knife, spear, gun, whatever. Most characters deal with these 2 stats. Special attack and defense determine how powerful the fireballs thrown by you are and how well you can take them back. Brad's fireballs, Nern and Ajit's finger beams, and I think RT's bag infernos use these stats to determine damage output. Speed is speed. It is the most important stat for everyone, as it allows you to have your turn before other party members, or more specifically, any enemy you are fighting. Luck is the random stat, as it raises your critical hit ratio. You can flat out ignore it, as there are other means of landing criticals in Lisa. Like with any other RPG, these stats rise after acquiring enough experience to level up, though don't expect to be refreshed when gaining one. You need to use healing items or rest at a suitable location to recover health and SP. Some enemies drop items like jerky or soda to recover those stats respectively, but most of the time you'll probably use mags, Lisa's equivalent to currency, to either buy them or buy a night at an inn. Hot tip: Always rest at an inn, as each crossroads has one. Resting at a fireplace has a few events that can happen, ranging from innocuous like getting farted on, to helpful like receiving an item, to detrimental like a gang member leaving or getting kidnapped. In the case of the latter, you have to find the gang that stole your party member and pay to get them back, as choosing to fight for their freedom ends up with a dead hostage. If gang members leave on their own accord, however, they're gone. You can't recover them. In Joyful, you're kinda limited to using healing items, as only one fireplace exists, and I swear its events are set in stone depending on which portion of the game you're in, but you only have to worry about Buddy, so it evens out as she just needs health items. I think I can get to status effects now, as there are around 40 in the game, though they can easily be broken up into a few categories. The main ones are status effects, debuffs, and buffs. Status effects are the same as they've ever been in any RPG ever. They're a negative effect on your character that either damages them for a set number of turns or prevents them from fighting. Poison, deep poison, burn, and bleed are all the damage status effects. While slightly annoying when inflicted on you, these can be massive boons when inflicted on an enemy, as they all do percentage-based damage. That means for enemies with loads of health, you can shave off massive amounts through any one of them listed, but they all work especially well when stacked together. Silence, confusion, sleep, scared, stun, paralysis, fallen, and flustered are all the restrictive status effects. They either prevent you or your opponent from acting in combat for a set number of turns, like confusion through flustered, or cut you off from using abilities until healed, like silence. While there are items to cure many of these status effects, waiting is what you'll mostly do to get rid of them. On to buffs, these are guard, rage, hide, iron body, cover, taunt, counterattack, drunk, stink, cool, and party mode. These all raise specific stats, or provide beneficial effects to party members like regeneration or taunting, freeing your weaker gangers from damage. Debuffs, meanwhile, are blind, wary, pissed, weird, hungover, depression, and tired. These obviously lower stats, though some can only be cured through resting like wary. There are some I did skip over as they require a closer look. Oiled Up increases fire damage, and there are pieces of equipment that carry the effect when worn. Clint is always oiled up, and Birdie's gasoline spit is able to oil up enemies. Queen Roger is able to extort foes for more mags, but there isn't much use to the ability, as there are many means of getting money within Lisa outside of combat. Joy and Withdrawal are the most critical buff and debuff in the game, as Brad has to deal with them. Because Joy is a drug, Brad will suffer from withdrawal ever so often, lowering his stats outside of special attack and defense to pitiful levels, and generally making Brad useless in combat. Suffering from withdrawal happens randomly to Brad, so it can crop up at the worst of times, and he isn't the only one that needs to take Joy. Some of the better damage dealers in his gang are Joy addicts as well, the likes of Carp, Tigerman, and Buckets, to name a few, also needing a dose of Joy from time to time. While you can wait out the withdrawal, it takes a not too minuscule amount of time to pass, and if you're in combat, that party member will effectively become an albatross around the neck, especially if they deal physical damage like Buckets or Tigerman. However, taking Joy, whether in withdrawal or not, grants the Joyed status effect. Remember how I said luck wasn't too big a deal? That's because most characters on Joy get a 100% critical hit ratio, while also having a higher hit rate and defensive stats. Brad and Buddy are already the best characters in the game, with the two on Joy easily smoking anything that comes in their way. The only issue with the Joyed status effect is that its duration is short, lasting between 6 to 10 turns. But if you can't kill whatever you are fighting in that time limit, just take some more Joy. It replenishes a user's HP as well, allowing them to tank blow after blow. Just keep it for the Joy addicts or main characters. No reason to use Joy on a non-Joy addict. The special mention goes to Buckets, as he doesn't get the critical hit rate off Joy. It makes sense seeing as his base stats when not in withdrawal are head and shoulders above everyone else. Joy basically recovers his stats instead of bolstering them. Is there anything else I'm missing? Oh right, that. A subset of enemies within Painful have permadeath moves like Fatal Chomp, Heart Squeeze, neck break, and decapitate. And when I mean permadeath, that's final. Any character hit by the above besides Brad or Buddy are gone forever, with our main duo taking either the maximum amount of damage as a permadeath move will instantly knock out Brad, or a whole heaping of hurt in Buddy's adventure. The only way to recover a dead party member is by reloading a save before the tragic event happened, and with how pain mode removes save points after you touch them, actually it isn't that much of an issue, as there are usually saves before deadly encounters, and simply by using status effects can you nullify these dangerous moves. Pissed Lock is a viable strategy, as is blinding, stunning, and scaring. You're more likely to lose gang members from Russian roulette, kidnapping, and any of the choices Buzzo forces on you. And, well, because of how constant save points are, reloading in response to a death isn't something I'll shame you for. Austin gave you the option to save in the first place, so rewinding time after a death is completely within the realms of the game. Basically, I'm saying this as someone who doesn't understand why permadeath is still a thing in games outside of, say, XCOM, or really experimental shit like Fear and Hunger. Speaking of, whenever Buzzo makes his appearance, expect a hard choice of either a party member or a limb, as you are losing one or the other. If you do decide to place Brad's arm on the block, he gets decreased stats and loses a few moves with one arm, while the other fervor lowers his combat abilities and removes his ability to do dial-up combos. Which pound of flesh do you prefer? Buddy, meanwhile, has to deal with men attacking her, thus she can wear masks to talk to vendors or avoid fights. Joyful and Painful are born very much from the same engine, so everything I've mentioned about combat, stat, and exploration-wise applies to the two, though Joyful is more engaged when it comes to its ending, as you have to go out of your way to find secret areas or return to certain locations with a mask equipped to determine what outcome you'll get post-credits. Befitting a game of the Wander and Wonder genre popularized by Mother, a lot of weird shit happens in Lisa P and J with usually almost no explanation, like as if to set you up for all the oddities you'll bear witness to. The very first encounter in the duology is a tiny yapping dog that Terry and the game itself describes as a ferocious beast. After a round of dog pummeling that would make Ness proud, Painful tells you, "Alright, that's the last of the normal encounters. I hope you're here for some truly bizarre battles, as that's all I have lined up." The lack of random encounters means every fight is its own unique deal, and it says a lot that I practically love all of them. It stems from a couple of ideas, mainly how an enemy NPC might approach you, what they do within the battle, and what happens after you clear them out. While for most battles you'll see who you're going to be facing, sometimes Painful and Joyful don't give you room to breathe as they shove a foe down your face. I pointed out the ambusher within the story recap as he is one such enemy. Only appearing near Widdly to Diddly's party zone, the ambusher looks like any other piece of shrubbery growing within Olathe, but as soon as you step a few feet in front of him, the living bush comes barreling towards you armed with a club and lacking self-preservation. There are quite a number of fights started like this where an NPC just decides to give you shit for no reason. Ambusher, the living tree, the swamp vagrant, and a whole helping of other battles only happen because an NPC randomly decides it doesn't like you. On the way to Crossroads 2, two of my favorite NPC encounters happen: Cosmo, Casamassa, and Joshi Bright Eyes. Before continuing, those names. When I said that there are no unnamed NPCs, this is what I meant. Every enemy outside the snakes, shadowy figures, and trash mobs have a name unique to them, and that sometimes provides a bit of insight to who they are. As with Joshi Bright Eyes, he is blind, and his attempt to try and shank Brad and the boys completely failing showcases that fact. You are absolutely allowed to skip over Joshi, as to actually fight him, you have to run into him, which isn't something you do by accident, not when he's a blind maniac brandishing a blade. Meanwhile, Cosmo seems like any other NPC you'd find in any of the other hubs. His only notable feature is that when you enter the screen he is on, he looks at Brad before looking away. Only when you move past him does he give you chase, armed with a knife and the fuck it adjustment. And I mean that truthfully, as he is an easy encounter, yet what he says after he's defeated always makes me chuckle. Fuck it, 2 tears in the bucket. Any enemy capable of talking will always have something to say after their defeat, some of these after-battle quotes humorously going on for a long time, like with Ambusher, or just being a word salad. Walter Stingray, the first legitimate fight in Painful, claims that this old salmon's swimming downstream tonight when you beat him, but that is merely the tip of the iceberg and only counting post-battle dialogue. A lot of Lisa, when it isn't drowning you in the darkness of humanity, is playing fast and loose with comedy of MIDI stylings. There's the absurd mixed in with the physical when Scott Lawson declares himself the master of surprise before kicking Brad in the dick, the truly dark with the life and times of Horace Finkel, or the hidden house in the construction yard with all the manservants, or the more self-referential like with the many displays of martial arts and the culture surrounding them. I didn't bring them up in the story recap, but there are a multitude of dojos you can visit to earn scrolls to boost Brad's stats, which require you to do some mindless tasks like jump off a great height 15 times, wait for an exuberant amount of time, fight what basically amounts to a Mokugen, or step on a bunch of rakes to earn not-so-ancient scrolls that lack legitimacy. Well, all except the final one because it isn't written in English. Mentioned previously, Austin is a martial artist, his chosen study wushu, so he knows a lot about McDojos that don't really teach students anything and give out diplomas and belts like candy or for the right price. Bob Friday is one massive joke directed towards the kind of con artist that teaches fake techniques like no-touch knockouts and other useless tripe. In that same breath, however, the only wushu representative in the story is Tiger Man, who is a one-trick pony damage dealer with a crippling addiction to joy. It's like Austin is poking fun at himself knowing that wushu's own practical applyment pales in comparison to, say, brute strength or a gun. Even Brad's strongest skills are literally him just headbutting his opponent, lacking any finesse or craft associated with karate. Before moving forward onto the gameplay portion of Painful and Joyful, these sentiments I'm bringing up have some forethought in the story, as there are a lot of non-verbal story cues or references that the game allows you to piece together. Going back to Brad's karate, it explains why he didn't teach Buddy any of his family techniques. The best type of self-defense isn't done through martial arts, but by using any means necessary to survive. If that means using a weapon, so be it. All the flashy skills and katas in the world don't compare to a rather large sword or a gun. That would mean that Buddy is far more dangerous than Brad, as with martial arts, the basis is to only defend yourself. Buddy doesn't have that limiter, as she wasn't taught a lick of any. Kill fast and kill hard is all she has to go on. Downright dirty human instinct that far out punches the likes of any Bushido code or mantra. This in turn calls to attention the raid on Brad and his friend's hut. One of the attackers has a rusty knife sticking out of him. The only fighter of Brad's friend group is Sticky, as he was secretly a member of the Rando army. He favors guns, not any melee options. Buddy meanwhile loves getting up close and personal, so you can piece together that, oh, Buddy is way more capable than the way that Brad describes her. This is merely one instance of foreshadowing in other devices, as this story is chock full of them. In the first crossroads, you can run into an orphanage run by a blonde muscle man that you accidentally burn down as a bit of dark humor. Come the Horace fight, you learn that the blonde man is Morris Dinkle, who Horace took the bulldozer degree from. When you accidentally turn the kids into ash at the orphanage, Morris describes the event as the second worst thing that has happened to him. The first would be him not receiving his degree. In Brad's teaching memory, there are 4 kids he talks to, but the most important ones are the 2 blonde kids. We know that the one watching from afar is Dustin, but the kid with the bolt cut, as we find out in Joyful, was a young Buzzo, explaining a lot of the little details connecting him to Brad. He would know where Brad's dojo was to vandalize it, as well as his relationship to Dustin, as Brad let him join his dojo for free. It paints just how clearly obsessed Buzzo was with Brad, that even at such a young age, like around 7 to 10, Buzzo was stalking Brad's every move directed by Lisa's whims. And yet, in turn, it is also observable just how impressionable Buzzo was. He started hating Brad when he was a kid. I would assume that Buzzo didn't really understand why Lisa wanted to get back at Brad or how much his life sucked under Marty's parenting until later on in his life post her death, but by that point he figured that the cost was sunk, in for a penny, in for a pound. The additional ending sequences for Joyful help illustrate points further, like Brad's shock and horror over Sticky teaching Buddy about sex. Depending on your actions within Joyful, you'll get one of 3 ending dialogues, centering around either Yato, Buzzo, or Brad. While all the Yato scenes kind of fall into the same line, he's a monster that used everyone to his own ends, whether Buzzo as a drug mule or his wife and daughter for his world domination scheme. The Brad and Buzzo endings shed a bit more light onto the two, as well as Lisa and Marty. While all the hallucinations of Lisa don't posit her in a flattering role, you can chalk those up to Brad and Buzzo's manifestations of guilt. With Buzzo's ending in Joyful, we get that hard confirmation that she manipulated Buzzo for her own ends, stripping away Lisa's mystique and almost sainthood. Despite her awful circumstances, she became no better than her abuser. Brad's ending dialogue, however, extends our knowledge on how far he was abused. Marty forced his son to participate in Lisa's molestation. His reaction to hearing Buddy tell him that Sticky told her about sex becomes quite understandable once you learn this fact, and the icing on the cake here is that repeatedly, Sticky is referred to as having a phallus-shaped head, so it makes you think that he really did step over that line when in reality he didn't. I could go on and on about a lot of these story moments and dialogue, as you can't throw a bottle without hitting something clever, funny, dark, or some combination of the 3. Like a mother like, Lisa knows how to keep the oddities coming. A lot of the real funny shit is optional, so you have to go digging for it. While I will deride Russian roulette later on, when you clear out the minigame, the crier basically tells you, "You're my child now, have a gun and do crime." Defeating Satan has him outright state that beating him doesn't matter. He's only a guy named Mike, not some supernatural entity that he's made out to be. EWC is one giant love letter to wrestling, both past and of the time, with the Shockmaster XB Shocklord only having one attack, the infamous botch that killed the WCW gimmick on the spot, to the Internal Championship, a recreation of a few storylines, mainly the corporate ministry with Painful using line-for-line dialogue straight from the McMahon reveal as the higher power, to Brock Lesnar snapping the Undertaker's undefeated WrestleMania streak, effectively kicking Brad out of the business as he quote-unquote ruined wrestling. The Fishman courtroom scene has a number of scenarios that can play out where Harvey either riles up the jury and judge more than you want him to Brad asking to leave way earlier than Harvey suggests the idea. An entire minigame is dedicated to servicing clients as a bee, with a multitude of patrons showing up like a Fishman, Salvation Green, a deer to name a few. There's a lot of funny stuff to discover within Painful and Joyful, some of which requires you to break the game. While you're supposed to be defeated by Demon X, hacking Painful so that the battle is winnable has Demon throw a big fuck you your way and cause an automatic game over. This is merely a fraction of Lisa's shadowy quirkiness, as I haven't even gone over to the gameplay. In short, for a bite-sized RPG, there is a whole lot of experimentation to be had with Lisa's party system. There are 30 gangers to recruit, each with their own traits and abilities, meaning you can formulate some pretty wacky teams. Sure, there are balancing issues, RT, Birdie, and Bo the most solid of hands that Brad can get his mitts on, but because of the permadeath nature, sorta, more on this later, seeing a member you like bite the bullet means you'll have to find a usage for someone in case a regular dies. While I've always taken RT as a must-pick anytime I play Painful, I always tend to switch up the rest of the main party. For damage dealers, the likes of Carp, Tiger, Mask, and Buckets I really enjoy, but that isn't to discredit characters like Roger, Yazan, Mad Dog, or even Rage. Carp, TM, and Buckets are pretty straightforward and lack gimmicks compared to the others, but that doesn't mean that those outside the 3 are worse off than my Golden Trinity. Even with the main trio, I have a hard time picking who I like the most. Just for a rundown, Carp specializes in multi-hit moves with detours into debuffs like Poison or Attack and Speed Down. Tiger Mask uses dial-up combos that deal heavy damage on top of all of his skills causing bleed, while Buckets has the best single target move in the game that casually deals near 2000 damage. Each has a shared flaw in that they are all joy addicts, which hurts Buckets the most, as he doesn't get the buff from using it, but all have their own shortcomings. Carp's Fever River can have pitiful accuracy unless equipped with glasses, which isn't the best accessory to give someone. Tiger Mask lacks any utility, as all he brings to the table is bleed and damage skills, and Buckets not only has the high price of getting him, but he suffers so much from Joy Withdrawal that even Tiger Mask outdamages him when suffering from the status effect. Meanwhile, someone like Queen Roger might also be a Joy addict, but due to the nature of his skills, they count as a normal attack. Since the weapons he wields are bats, a number of them causing status effects on a normal attack, you do the math. Roger focuses on multi-hit moves, so you say you give him a stun bat, that means he gets a lot of chances to stun a dangerous enemy like one that has a permadeath move. Yazan is one of the many hybrid characters blending support, attack, and debuff into one package, and while I wish he did get more sword moves, he's handy in any team and doesn't suffer from Joy. And who wouldn't want to use a samurai who carries his pet cat along with him? While I usually replace Mad Dog as his moveset is pretty small, focusing on bleed and burn, he acts as a suitable tank with a taunt skill that fills up his TP for each enemy taunted. While everyone I know who has played Painful has always replaced Rage, because of his speed, he acts as a great item master, able to chuck firebombs before any enemy gets a turn, or revive down party members before more get knocked out. And these are merely the characters I've brought up and have used somewhat regularly. If you go the distance to level up Terry Hintz, he gets the best attack in the game called the Hottest Dance, dealing considerable damage, even more so to a foe drenched in oil. Harvey specializes in layering status effects onto a single target, inflicting helpful debuffs like Confusion or Piss that very few monsters resist. His damage output isn't the best, but he fulfills the role of a staller. Due to the short length of Painful, you can complete a run in around 8 hours or less, granting you the ability to play around with who you might use next. While Birdie and Bo are good, I find both to be boring in utility compared to someone like Dick, Goose, or even Buffalo. While Joyful does sadly take away the party system, it does step up the difficulty of the encounters to compensate. Joyful wants you to use Buddy's loadout, many battles becoming manageable by using status effects or items. A problem I always have with higher budgeted RPGs is that status effects or items are either useless or vendor trash. Persona and SMT are guilty of this, as outside of buffs and debuffs that raise or lower stats, I never touch any of the skills that cause poison, paralysis, or any other nasty effects. Why aggravate an enemy when I can kill them? On the item front, Pokemon's X line of items are gutter trash. Just use a move that raises stats or equip a Pokemon with an item. Joyful takes my qualms with the uselessness of status effects and makes them some of the best moves in the game. Harry's the best example of this, as he has a metric fuck ton of health to cut down. While you can quaff down Joy like M&Ms and start hacking away at his jugular, Poison works wonders as it does percentage-based damage. Stack it on, then begin to laugh at Harry as he takes a casual 9,000 damage per turn that you add to with each swing of Buddy's blade. Joyful really puts you into her mindset of all is fair in love and war. There is no such thing as an underhanded tactic. Joyful isn't hard in any degree as long as you use the tools the game gives you. Only one encounter what I call bollocks on, and I think that's what's cool about Painful and Joyful. Despite the premise of a reaming, both games allow you to bullshit the game back. Painful mode's extra encounters add more texture to an already enjoyable base game, spicing up certain battles and forcing you to flex your brain a bit more. That said, Painful and Joyful do have some contradictions to sort out when it comes to the pain they want to cause. 30 minutes. That's how much time my playthrough was diverted because of Russian roulette. While I can appreciate it for how it enforces many of the plot elements of Lisa, you still have to suffer 3 successful rounds of it, or even more if you want buckets. It's just not fun, which is both the point and the failure of roulette. Like, on one hand, I can appreciate what the game means to the setting of Lisa. People are desperate in Olathe and hunger for fame, money, and bloodshed. Russian roulette easily fills in that niche, and your handling of it is the perfect marriage between gameplay and story. You get to feel like a bad person because you're wagering your own party members just so you can get money to spend on items. This is such a great extension of many of the ideas in Lisa and helps establish Brad as a character, but playing it is an utter bore because of the randomness, facilitating a save scum strategy because losing gets you nothing. I have perfected the game of Russian Roulette and Painful because I always skip over save crows that I know I won't use to save them for Russian Roulette. That means in the first crossroads alone, I use a total of only 2 crows. One before the Rhodes Scholars, and one before the first instance of Russian Roulette. Because of how easy the encounters are in the first area of the game, the only danger you have to worry about is accidentally jumping off a cliff when saving the animals for roulette, which merely requires you to be mindful of your button presses. Stepping away from the saving of the crows, as this is a pain mode exclusivity, the first instance of roulette is probably the most bullshit thing in Lisa, as it lacks much of the bite a lot of the other choices forced on you by Buzzo have. The key word here is active. You're making the choice of either a limb or a party member, your friend's or buddy's nipple, an arm, or your items. This ties into a first-time experience as well, as if you don't know that Buzzo is coming up, you really have to make a hard choice between 2 outcomes you don't want. Russian Roulette is disconnected from that as you don't have an active role to play. You choose a party member, preferably one that you'll never use, as with 30 gang members, you're bound to find some you don't care for, and then hope. Pure random chance that can barely be manipulated. Even in situations where an enemy has a permadeath move, you can still actively mitigate a foe's chances of using one via status effects, or in the logical scenario for a number of dangerous fights, running away. You don't have to fight Peter, Beatty, or Satan. They are entirely optional, which is the same for playing roulette after the first 3 rounds. And again, winning isn't optional to advance past this story moment. The way it's phrased by the crier seems like you just have to play 3 rounds, but no. You have to win, which, depending on your luck, can force a reload, as by that point in Painful, you only have around 9 gang members to wager. That's the maximum number, as if you do give up Terry at the end of the prologue and a party member to Buzzo, you'll only have 7. Rounds can go on for a shocking amount of time too, so there's the time aspect being wasted as well. Russian Roulette is a giant middle finger, and I get why, but it's still a giant middle finger meant solely to ruin your playing experience. It is the only moment of Lisa that I actively dread, as it feels like a fuck you for the sake of a fuck you, not as a hard choice that the player has to overcome or an event the player has to bounce back from because of their own poor decision making. With the way I phrased it, if I may indulge in a bit of idea crafting, why can't I have a choice to either play by the crier's rules or just attack him? I get why you can't win against Buzzo or some of the other fights like Demon X, but Painful has shown the ability to have alternate fight outcomes. Giving up Terry forces a battle later on, choosing not to murder Sticky has you face off against him before the boat's construction, and probably the most applicable fight is the battle against the rando goons in the schoolboy's turf. If you don't insult them, you get a much harder fight against a big group instead of 2 fights. One with the weaker band and another with the strong man. The way I think about it, if you are given an option to fight the crier and his bodyguard, you can skip forced roulette, but never get a chance to play it, locking you out of money and buckets. This still provides the hard choice aspect that many parts of Painful deal with, like resting at a fireplace instead of an inn leading to a party member getting kidnapped, or Buzzo's demands. And you could make the fight difficult like how the Rhodes Scholars are, with a loss forcing you into the minigame, much like how losing to the Rhodes Scholars causes Mad Dog to die. While I don't have many other complaints with Painful, when you know certain moments are coming up, particularly on the replay, a lot of the gut punching gets reduced. There's a reason why I always give up Farty to the first Buzzo demand or choose Buddy's nipple over the party. I know that those events are coming up and can mitigate the damage to almost nil. Even when Buzzo demands an arm or your items, it's much easier to give up the items as all Buzzo takes are your consumables. He leaves your equipment intact, allowing you to sell unused pieces so you can make your money back. This is definitely a replay issue for sure, as going blind into Painful will leave you caught in the lurch in the good way, so just be mindful of this on later playthroughs. Austin has said it himself that Painful works as a one and done, so even he knows these moments lessen over time. My qualms mostly extend to Joyful, and it's because of how many mechanics are dropped from Painful. Buddy is a fun character to play around with, but her lacking a gang means encounters against tough enemies lack that dangerous edge of having to make sure they don't fire off with a permadeath move. A lot of her battles are also pretty lopsided, as I can fundamentally break down all the back half fights in Joyful as pop lucrative tea, joy, make your opponent bleed and poison, then hit with strongest attack until you need to pop joy, tea, or status effects again. It says a lot that her hardest fights are against multi-man teams, as Buddy has poor crowd control outside of firebombs. Benny Omega and Buck Spider is probably the hardest skirmish in Joyful, as both of them are easily able to stun Buddy during the first round, and if you don't have firebombs, prepare to feel like stone cold as your pile drove into oblivion. Not even Vega Van Dam or Sweetheart match up to the BS that Benny and Buck are capable of, as both have pile drivers set up as a 5 out of 10, meaning they use it half the time. Paralysis can be a one-turn problem, or death, as how long it wants to last is variable. I abhor the regular battles Buddy has to deal with, as more often than not, many of the grunts she has to face off with have stun moves compared to supposedly tougher struggles against Joy Mutants or boss characters, where all they really have in their repertoire is high damage moves. At the end of the day, Joyful does feel tacked on, as it's missing a lot of the charm that Painful had, the gallows humor kept to a minimum, and Buddy just not being a fun character to follow. If Brad was well-intentioned yet a failure of a human being, Buddy is right up her own ass and is as charismatic as a bleeding infection. Brad's mostly silent routine helps paint the world around him and how legitimately kooky it is, with the moments that he does open his mouth portray just how much sorrow he has behind his facade. I called Buddy a whiny brat throwing a temper tantrum, and that is most of her dialogue, going on about how she'll kill the warlords or constantly browbeating Rando because she can. I get why she's like this, but like Russian Roulette, that doesn't absolve the issues I have with how soul-draining she is as a character to follow. Even Austin has stated that he hates writing for Buddy, and I think what would have worked is if her boisterous nature was turned down a notch or two. She never has a moment of vulnerability like Brad does, allowing us, the audience, to step into her shoes and understand her frame of mind. Buddy is always combative, never letting the mask slip, which makes forming a genuine connection with her as a character hard to do. What type of person is Buddy besides sword-slinging psychopath? Brad puts on a tough face, but it crumbles within Painful, allowing us to see how much pain he's in. Buddy doesn't get that nuance, which hurts Joyful in the long run, as I don't know if it wants us to get behind her as a main character or not. Lisa might be my favorite RPG of all time. It has a perfect length that never overstays its welcome, nor feels too short, while still retaining many ideas that a much larger game within the genre would implement. The 30 companions of Painful make replaying it a joy each time, as I don't know who I'll employ next, and while the various choice moments lack their punch on subsequent playthroughs, I love how they further the various themes of Lisa. Brad is possibly the only sad dad character I enjoy in the large sea of them, and while Joyful dropped a lot of the better elements of Painful, the increased difficulty makes it a somewhat enjoyable 2-hour experience, popping joy and cutting necks. Austin really put himself into the title, and it feels like a labor of love brought out by a singular guy. Not only is it one of the best indie games I've played, it's one that I think more people should. Funny how something on the shorter side like Lisa can get me to Killer 7 links. The density is completely there though, just less confusing, as that's what made Killer 7's analysis a bit of an uphill battle. I think right at the end, seeing as there isn't much else to say, Lisa does have various fan projects both released and in the works. Hopeful and Pointless are probably the most well known, and as if telling everyone that he's finished with the plot, Austin has gone on record as saying that any fan games of Lisa are canon in the plotline. In a way, that's a bow on this whole adventure, seeing as Lisa started life as a fan game for you and Nikki, only for it to spin out on its own and encourage other people to create their own editions. Austin, Dingaling, Widdly Too Diddly, you utter mad lad. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/let's talk about games, no apostrophe in the let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the Showtime reels. While spring is in the air come April, so is the scent of gold coins and garlic. Wario World is the Showtime reel for the month, and I'll even add in a free pile driver on the house. And as always, this showing of Lisa Painful and Joyful is over, but stay tuned for our next feature involving robots of a few shapes and sizes, the longest runtime movie franchise, or what feels like it, and possible explosions. Possibly.